Hello everyone, I'm going to tell you something that I think you already know by now, and if you don't, then, well, spoilers. We as a society have become very subservient to the spoiler culture, something that we've all become very sensitive of, that I think has grown exponentially in size within the past few years because of how much bigger the internet is getting and how much smaller the world is becoming after social media app after social media app that just brings us all closer together, and we all talk amongst each other, but more importantly, we all like to share shit. Every time something gets released or some news kind of breaks, whether it be good or bad, which we've had plenty of fun examples within the past couple of weeks, unfortunately, we always want to talk about it. We always want to just share information left and right because we love seeing that little blink of a light or that little notification show up on the screen saying, hey, whoever you sent this to has responded back, and now you're having some kind of conversation that otherwise you wouldn't have thought would be fathomable amongst yourselves in person. Like, the shyest of people are probably the most outgoing when it comes to being online, talking amongst themselves, some of which are members of the geek and nerd community when it comes to things that are very spoiler heavy, such as the case with Star Wars The Last Jedi. A new trailer has dropped, and prior to the release of this trailer, Rian Johnson was advising people on his Twitter, and I know this firsthand because I do follow the guy on Twitter, saying that if you want to go into the film as clean as possible, avoid the trailer at all costs. But then he put a little addendum at the bottom saying, but it's so good. And my assumption is that he was talking about the trailer. He was talking about the trailer being really, really good. My assumption was that if Rian Johnson, who I think is a very devoted geek and nerd to the culture, to the nature and mythology of Star Wars, and to just anything that he deems is very important to keep very secretive when it comes to spoilers and when it comes to very vital plot points. I mean, this is a guy who directed 3 episodes of Breaking Bad, one of which has like the biggest bombshells of them all. He knew how important it was to keep things secret. And so for him to say that the trailer was good was enough for me to say, okay, I don't think there's any heavy or significant spoilers, at least from my perspective, for him to say that. But he is trying to tell people that if you want to have that really fresh and brand new experience going into The Last Jedi, do not watch the trailer. And I think since then, that kind of sparked up a little conversation within my mind about when is it okay for a spoiler to be categorized as a spoiler, because sometimes certain things could be shown in a trailer, but it could be interpreted in many different ways. And from what I can take away from other people talking about the trailer, and the reason why I said this is because yes, I have not seen the Star Wars Last Jedi trailer. Will I ever see it? I'm willing to meet the whole concept of avoiding this trailer at all costs halfway, because I know that the world is so small and the internet is even smaller. Well, when I say that, I don't mean in terms of the scope of it, but I just mean in the way of how easy it is to access information, to really take a blind turn somewhere amongst the internet, whether it be within Facebook or YouTube, and then before you know it, you're watching the trailer because it just starts playing. Because when you go on Facebook, shit starts playing. When you go on Twitter, shit automatically starts playing. So it's a little difficult to avoid things like this. And so what I'm trying to get at is that I'm going to try to meet this whole concept of avoiding the trailer at all costs kind of sort of halfway by saying that I am not going to voluntarily watch it online or through some kind of app or whatever. I'm going to try to, as much as it is within my control, to not watch the trailer until the day comes, probably when I go see Thor Ragnarok, that the trailer is attached to the film when we go sit in the theater and it plays right before the movie actually starts within the trailers. I think that'll be okay because I'm already sitting down. I don't want to get up to be like la la la. It's really pointless for me at that point. So I think that's a really good way to kind of measure this whole thing. That's how I'm going to perceive it. But so many folks were able to just jump on to a trailer, not thinking about the spoilers, or at least trying to be cautious as much as possible. And from what I gather, it wasn't that terrible of a trailer when it came to spoilers. But it also brought back a little something that I witnessed recently, which was Double Toasted. The guys over at Double Toasted, they recently did the review of Blade Runner 2049. However, in that review, a couple of the guys managed to drop a little detail about the film that wasn't necessarily presented within the marketing material for the film, from plot outlines of the film in websites like IMDb, to of course what everybody's going to be keeping up with and watching, which are the trailers and the TV spots. I'm not going to say what that detail is, obviously, for those of you who have not caught up with Blade Runner 2049 just yet, but it really is somewhat of a bombshell detail that even I didn't know, and it was one of the big things that really stems the plot of the film and makes you kind of second guess where things are going when the plot starts to evolve as it progresses during its runtime. And I do think that the guys were a little in the wrong, and their justification, or at least one of the guys' justification, was that this plot device is introduced within the first, I want to say, about 10 minutes of the film. And that's true. Within 10 minutes of the film, we get introduced to this plot device that we weren't used to, that we didn't know about the film. That to me doesn't justify it, personally, and I think there's fine lines that categorize a spoiler, and to me it would have to be that if it's not in the marketing material, if it's not within the common knowledge that is distributed by the marketing material from the trailers to TV spots, it's considered a spoiler. So even though a trailer could be very spoiler heavy, which we've seen various cases, I think the one that comes instantly to my mind would have to be the trailer for Terminator Salvation. I guess by showing it in the trailer, yes, it's a spoiler. It's a heavy plot device that could have made the film much more interesting. But now that it's out in the open, it can't be considered a trailer. So when you go see the film and somebody reviews it saying that, oh, hey, so-and-so was so-and-so, and people are quick to call spoilers, it was within the marketing material. Unfortunately, yes, they should have kept it from us, but it was out there, it was public knowledge. If it's not public knowledge, don't mention it. No, literally, don't mention it. I'm not saying like, thank you, don't mention it. No, seriously, don't talk about it, because that is, I think, what could be probably the best way to measure this whole spoiler culture thing, and how exactly do we perceive what is a spoiler and what isn't, because over the years it's manifested into something differently. It's constantly evolving, kind of like a virus, because spoilers meant a whole different notion back in the day. Spoiler culture has been around for literally decades. We trail all the way back to the days of Hitchcock, where when he would release movies like Psycho, and he would lock the doors when the movie started because he didn't want anybody to run out, have a conversation with somebody in the hallway and be like, oh yeah, so and so this thing happens. And honestly, here I am being vague for a movie that came out almost 50 years ago, Psycho, because I know that some folks have not seen Psycho, because we've gone so far long down the timeline that some folks will, I'll tell them, have you seen Psycho, that are within the younger generation, and they'll be like, no, and I want them to have that fresh experience. Similar with other plot heavy films, especially that are very heavy on the plot twist, like Sixth Sense, Fight Club. Yes, those movies have been around for years, and the twists have been exploited and spoofed and done to death, but if I come across somebody who is fresh and brand new to the experience, I don't want to tarnish it for them, no matter how long the film has been out. If that information has been withheld from them, then I think that's considered a spoiler. If it's not public knowledge, it's a spoiler. Do not ruin it for anybody. Yes, you can make fun of it all you want, but there's ways to be kind of classy about it. And unfortunately, I do think that the guys over at Double Toasted weren't necessarily classy with it, because I think they should have been a little bit more sensitive with what exactly is perceived as public knowledge versus what could also be considered a spoiler. Because trust me, there are cases where things are a little bit hypersensitive, and there's ways that you can kind of take things what would ordinarily be a spoiler and just turn them around so that you can still be a little dignified with it. Another good example, and again, you might consider this a spoiler, so there you go, there's your little warning. Kingsman: The Golden Circle, one of the most recent releases. The marketing behind the movie heavily emphasized a very significant presence by Channing Tatum as one of the supporting characters as a cowboy. Well, he's barely in the film. He literally has like 5 minutes of screen time in the film. Why does he have only that amount of time in the film? I'm not going to disclose that. The guys over at Double Toasted did in fact do that in the review, and I was a little disappointed with that, even though it didn't affect me so much, because at the point that I listened to the review, I already watched the movie, so it didn't bother me so much. But I can understand why it would bother other folks, because they started to divulge into details that weren't exactly public knowledge. Now, of course, his screen time is not public knowledge, but it is something that involves the quality of the film, and as a reviewer, you do need to touch upon details that reflect the quality of the film. you just can't go into specific plot points without mentioning at the beginning of the review that this is going to be a spoiler review. That's when the etiquette comes into play. That's when you playing it smart comes into play. And I think that's a good kind of basis of rules as to what exactly makes it appropriate to follow this whole notion of spoiler culture, and what exactly we can talk about versus what we cannot talk about, because going into these movies as fresh as possible does really change up the experience. If you know ahead of time that so-and-so dies or this certain twist comes along, it does tarnish the experience because you're not going to be at that hype level that other folks may be. And that's a very sad situation when you have so many people going crazy about the film and then you want to be at that hype level, but you can't because going into the movie you already know what's going to happen. So you're just like, oh, okay. That's probably why I'm not going to have the experience that other folks had with Game of Thrones, because Game of Thrones has been spoiled for me left and right because everybody wants to talk about it. Everybody wants to do this and that on Facebook and on Twitter. Those are the two dominant sides that are humongous spoilers for either Game of Thrones or The Walking Dead. One of the reasons for why I'm very hesitant to jump on board with season 8 of The Walking Dead is because everybody wants to talk about it. And because of that, I feel like my experience is going to be cut underneath my feet before I can even get started. And I think that's something that needs to be adapted the further we go on with these shows, because it's just going to be, whether it be the shows or movies, it's just going to be ruining the fun, because this is an art form that needs to be respected, and when you're spoiling it, you're disrespecting it. So now I want to hear from you guys. What were some experiences you've had with the whole concept of spoiler culture? When was there a situation where something got spoiled for you and it really did ruin the experience, or you simply just didn't care and still managed to absorb whatever that show or that movie was all the same without being affected about knowing what was happening ahead of time? And do you think that there has to be some kind of reform or some kind of change with how we approach spoiler culture and how we can kind of categorize certain things that happen within a film as to being either public knowledge that you could easily disclose in a review or in a conversation, or that could be deemed as a spoiler and you shouldn't talk about it? Whatever you're thinking in that little noggin of yours, please let me know in the comments below. Make sure you like and share this video, and do not forget to subscribe for more videos that are talking about all the latest things happening within our nerd culture. Nerd. Why did I just say that like that? Nerd. Also, stay tuned to my channel this week, as I'm hoping to bring you guys not only a let's play of Shadow of War that's hopefully going to be edited and cut together in a very fun loving way, but also a review that I'm really looking forward to bringing you guys, season 1 of Spectacular Spider-Man. So if you guys are stoked for that, be sure to subscribe if you're a newcomer. Until next time, guys, take care. The biggest culprit is this girl named Crystal, who commands Lockjaw, who's got the giant-ass bullseye on the back of her fucking head. And she is terrible. This is the worst acting I've seen in a while. And like I said, I made it to the end of Iron Fist, and that show had its fair share of bad acting, especially from Danny in that final episode. He's like this.